Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Corporate Jet Investor London 2020. It's great to see so many people here. There's a Slido vote going, how optimistic are you, having heard the first day, and everyone who has voted so far is optimistic. It's because the pessimists got stuck on the pub crawl last night and haven't made it here. Delighted to start with a panel looking at the new and pre-owned market. We have 3 legends of the aircraft broking world. On my far left, Alireza from Freestream. Alireza Ittihadieh from Freestream needs no introduction. He's probably shouted at a large proportion of the people in this room. Next to him, delighted to have Pascal, who hasn't shouted, from Pascal Bachman.
I'm Swiss, I hardly shout.
Yeah, from Jetcraft. And finally, Miss Cosmopolitan Bachelor of the Month, 1972. You can, yeah? Steve Varsano. It's all true, by the way. It is true, isn't it, Steve?
Let's delete that.
Okay. We're going to start by, well, let's start, easy question. Pascal, how was 2019 for the pre-owned sales?
Well, 2019 has been an interesting year for us. Maybe you remember last year I was here talking about 18 and telling you we sold more than 100 aircraft and everything was great. I think 18 in part, the good result was due to the US tax laws, which helped us a lot. A lot of people decided to use them in the first year because they didn't know if they would still be there in the second year. So last year we didn't sell that many aircraft, but the good news is, because there's always a good news, our average per deal went from 16 million to 19 million. So in the end, we sold a bit less aircraft, but we didn't earn less money. So if we can work a bit less and earn the same, I mean, I'm all for it.
Alireza?
Like Jetcraft, 19 was a terrible year. I think it was probably the worst year we've had since 2008, 2009. It was a strong first quarter, literally a 0 second quarter, a relatively strong third quarter, and a rollover fourth quarter to the first quarter of 20. So it was rough.
And is that just, was that a trend? Is it a trend you can see, or is it just?
Look, I'm a great believer of the 7-year cycle. It is the beginning. This was the beginning of the downward cycle, and I think everything that has been on a bull run for 12 years, 10 to 12 years, it's eventually going to correct itself. The hope we all had was a little bit more foreign sales, meaning outside the US sales, and that just wasn't happening. I mean, it just wasn't there. It wasn't coming from anywhere.
Steve, cheer us up.
Well, I don't know, average price per airplane we sold probably is lower, but average profit was higher, so I don't really care about the average price. So yeah, we see a few less units, but we've made more money, so that's what counts to us. We see a good deal flow, a very consistent deal flow, which is really good for us. And maybe because of the European exporting to the US has been important because of the strength of the dollar, because of the strength of the U.S. economy, whatever it is. But that's been a lot of the reason why we see consistency. And it's still a part of the Trump tax cut plan, and the depreciation allowances helped. I think a lot of that outflow still continue.
Are you optimistic about 2020?
If you would have asked me this 3 weeks ago, I would have said absolutely. But I don't think anybody understands the significance of this coronavirus thing. I mean, I think this has got major, major repercussions. And if it doesn't get controlled, it could have really serious effect. I mean, there is a good side to everything. There's a glass half full. I mean, we wanted to save carbon emissions. No problem. China is 27% of the contribution of carbon emissions in the world. Nobody's driving cars. Nobody's flying airplanes. there's no carbon emissions in China anymore. So, you know, that helps. You know, oil is down, you know, 20%. And they contribute, they buy 15% or use 15% of the world oil supplies. That's down 20%. So the prices went down from $70 to $54 a barrel. And so there are good things to it. But the bad things is that the supply chain of what comes out of China and what goes into, whether it's phones or Kmart or cars or anything, is got unbelievable repercussions, and it's going to hit the global economy. And obviously, selling airplanes has to do with the profits of companies, and that's going to be a big, big impact. And I think we're going to see, if they don't control it soon, it's going to have very big effects. Even if some of the manufacturers here or our businesses don't deal with China, it's still going to have indirectly a big effect.
Wow, this is breaking news. Steve Varsano, pessimistic. It's never happened before.
There'll be great opportunities to buy airplanes.
Ali?
I don't think the coronavirus is any relevance. I think it's the psychological side of it. The SARS virus was far greater than the coronavirus, and we've survived it.
We're not talking about Corona beer.
Right? No, I know. We're not in Mexico. We're in China.
We're on the same page.
I mean, just look back at the two different virus effects we've had. I think it's everything we're going to see is going to be psychological. 12-year bull market. It's going to correct itself. There's no other way of looking at it. Anybody wants to. Human emotion plays a part in everything we do, whether it's the stock market or the aircraft market. And, you know, we've had a rally of purchases happening. We had reasonably 10 great years. And I think it's a correction. I think if we're going to see anything, it's going to be the next excuse everybody is going to have, I'm going to wait for the US elections. The following that is going to be, everybody was waiting for Brexit, and now US elections. There's always something happening. So the human emotion part of it plays a big role in all of this, in my view.
But just to put that in perspective, back with the SARS issue, which was in 2000, I think, 3. So that's 18 years ago. Since then, the China output, went from 1.7 trillion to 14 trillion. So their economy is 8 times bigger than it was then. And already in 2 weeks, more people died than it did in SARS in 5 months. So it's going to have a much more grander effect than SARS.
I mean, China is not that relevant anymore. It really isn't, sorry. In aviation, it's not. You want to be in aviation, you've got to be in the United States of America, period. It's the only buyers who still write checks.
Remember this conversation, okay?
Actually, the video will be available after, for many years to come.
I want to be the optimist here, you know.
I think we need one.
Well, let the Swiss guy be the optimist here. You know, if you have a choice and you have the means between traveling on your own aircraft and with 200 other people in not your aircraft on the airlines, and there's a virus in the air, what you choose, you know. So you need your own aircraft now more than ever.
and manufacturers did sell aircraft in Asia during SARS. You know.
Remember this conversation.
There's plenty of charter aircraft.
Ali, let's talk about emotions. So, at the moment, there's just no hurry to buy.
Look, it's clear that people are a lot more relaxed. They're not in a rush to do anything. And given the amount of buying that took place up to this point and the demand and supply and the prices, there's always going to be a buyer. There's always a market. But I don't think people are in that much of a hurry anymore because it doesn't look like interest rates worldwide are going to go up. The governments around Europe and the United States keep on printing cash. And, you know, and they don't need to push the interest rates. I mean, what's amazing for me is that there's no inflation. There's been no inflation. With all this printing, there's no inflation. So I've never seen it goes against every economic textbook that you've read in college and afterwards. So yeah, the human emotion plays a big part, and I think people take profit in the stock market. We've seen a huge profit taking because people are concerned on the broader spectrum of the financial markets with the coronavirus. But I think the private aviation, private aircraft market is going to be reluctant to move any faster than it is going to this year for sure, because people are going to, as I said, they're going to say, there's the US elections. We want to wait and see what happens there, who gets elected. I mean, we all know who's going to get elected, so what are we waiting for? The other side of it is there are going to be some other issues somewhere else around the world. The problem is the developing country, the so-called BRICS, they've gone out of the picture. There's no Chinese buyer, there's no Brazilian buyer, there's no Indian buyer, there's no Russian buyer. They've disappeared. They have vanished into the thin air. And there are 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe 10, 15, whereas go to America, you've got 15 just in one state, another 50 on another state, and the list goes on. So yeah, the human emotion part, for me, it's a big player. It plays a big role in any decision-making process we all make. And we get affected by the news. We all start going into a spin. We don't even know what corona is, and we're all panicking. We just know it's killed a few people. Why? How? How did it happen? What's the controlling factor? We've got one patient, Chinese patient, who died in England, and now the whole of England is in a spin.
Pascal, do you agree? Let's talk about Europe. Do you see opportunity? You're based in Europe. Do you see opportunities?
Well, yes, I do. I do see opportunities, and not only in Europe. I'm caring for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And talking about last year for our region was actually a good year. And Ali speaking about the US. Obviously, the US always has been the biggest market and the largest market. For Jetcraft, it's about half our sales that we make into the US. But last year we did about 1/3 into Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is quite good. And if I look at the trend, I mean, we had a very bad second quarter as well last year, and then we covered quite nicely. And if I look at the beginning of this year, the end of last year, the number of deals we already closed this year, I see honestly no reason to be pessimistic, and I think we have good potential, and maybe it's because of the structure we have. We have people on every continent who are local, and which means we are maybe more aware of what's happening in the different markets because we have people on the ground, and that makes a difference, I'm sure.
Steve, you've only got an office in London.
Yeah. I agree, Alireza. All the business in America, go move over there. Take all that business, please. Okay. I think the opportunities internationally, first of all, let me go back, okay? I'm optimistic about our business. I'm just talking about the global economy, okay? And more people are going to fly privately because of that, and the charter business, I think, you're going to see a drastic increase in the short term, depending on what happens long term. But as far as international markets, yeah, it is slim pickings. You're right. I mean, there's very few deals going on in certain countries outside the U.S. It is just a few here and there. But those opportunities are what we thrive on. There's bigger opportunities. A lot of people in America are competitors. It's so easy to buy an N-registered airplane and sell it to an N-registered buyer. I mean, for us, it's like ordering a Starbucks coffee. We don't get those opportunities. I mean, every single deal we have is very complicated. We sell it from a seller of an airplane from the Ukraine and sell it to a buyer in Pakistan. If an American broker got that phone call, he'd think the terrorists outside are going to kill him. But those kind of transactions are where you can make money, and there's opportunity, and there's not much competition. So that's where we thrive on. That's why we're not doing as many deals as,
I agree.
as Jetcraft or some of the other guys. We're not doing as many deals because we don't have a base in the U.S. But, our average deal is much stronger because they need our help a lot more. So we're much more targeted, laser focused on our clients, and it just takes us a lot more effort. And closing a deal has gotten much more complicated. And I don't know if it's just because all the MROs and the manufacturer service centers are really focusing on that as being a much stronger profit center. But every single pre-buy is taking at least double what it used to take as far as time and cost. Corrosion issues have really gotten out of hand on airplanes. Airplanes are getting older. So
have corrosion issues got out of hand, or have buyers just got, there's been corrosion for a long time. Is it just because we're in a buyer's market, or has corrosion got worse?
I just think that it's been nitpicked to death now, and they're just, I don't know what you feel. I mean, I see that, the manufacturers are having a field day, and it's doubling the cost of every inspection.
Yeah, I fully agree with Steve here. Clearly, what we see is every pre-buy is taking longer, and the cost has been higher as well. There's no doubt about that.
There is a lot of transactions that are going from the east, meaning the Russian, CIS, China, and going to the U.S. And Steve is right. Most U.S. brokers just, they run a mile if they see. I mean, one occasion I was told, "Oh, we're interested in your aircraft, but can we do 192-month inspection to de-Chinese it?" And I'm like, "What?" I said, "It's doing it 96 months. Why do I need to do 100?" I mean, that's the kind of attitude, primitive attitude that you get from some of the guys, our friends in the U.S. So yes, it is a huge opportunity. It is a huge opportunity to buy Chinese, Americanize it, and sell it.
I'd just like to apologise to all the Americans in the room.
There's nothing to apologise about.
Just called them primitive.
No, some. I said there's some primitive brokers who make a big deal out of nothing. It's a fact. Why are you shying away from it?
I'd like the views of this panel are not necessarily the views.
It's my view
of Corporate Jet Investor.
But it makes...
You wanted entertainment? I'm giving you entertainment.
But it makes all the programs much more important also. Nobody really wants to buy airplanes. Yeah, whether it's, JSSI or corporate care or smart parts, or those become really essential because, it just...
Well, if you don't have it, you don't sell, period.
Yeah, because it's hard to value a plane that doesn't have those programs.
Yeah.
Those programs have become a CFO's dream because you can really, budget safely.
No, literally, if you don't have it, you can't sell it. There's that phobia that if you don't have an engine program, you can't sell an airplane anymore. So you need the corporate care, the plane parts, whatever they are, and as expensive as they are, they sell the airplane at the end of the day.
For some guys who have tip-to-tail kind of programs, if they would add corrosion on there, they can make a fortune.
Well, I think the corrosion part, it has become an issue, but we're seeing that because I don't think the materials, there's got to be an effect on the materials that OEMs are using, because there's no way all of a sudden there's such a high degree of corrosion on all type of aircraft. And it's also become a big thing to check, whereas it wasn't a big thing to check 15, 20 years ago.
Great question from the audience. For how much longer do you see the prices of pre-owned inventory dropping? Does anyone see anything which will make prices go up?
No, nothing will make prices go up. But I think since the Trump tax cut 2 years ago, you've seen a real stabilization in prices. A lot of inventory got taken up really quickly, so the selection of pre-owned airplanes, quality pre-owned airplanes, really minimized. I mean, from 5 or 10-year-old airplanes, really was hard to find. So those prices really stopped going down.
Yeah, I think we're in a quite stable period right now, and it depends on offer and demand, right? And if you look at certain markets, like the legacy 650 right now, you don't have really a good legacy 650 on the market. And we have one coming up, and the owner has, quite rightly recognized it, and he's asking good money for his aircraft. And I think he can, because if somebody wants to buy one, this is pretty much the only one you have, which has a good pedigree and is available right now. So offer and demand is what guides you here.
I love the fact you're trying to sell an aircraft on stage. If you'd like to line up to have a chance for the legacy.
Did you get the feeling I was trying to? No, never.
Ali?
I think there's still downward pressure on older aircraft. I think anything 10 years or newer is going to sell a lot easier. And at more stable prices. But at the end of the day, demand and supply. If there's no demand, there's only one way the market is going to go, and further downward pressure. We can always ask 18.5 for an airplane that's worth 16, but it's always going to trade at 16.
Someone's asking how much for the legacy.
I'll come and see you afterwards.
Another pre-owned markets have dropped, but new aircraft sales and deliveries are up. Why the dichotomy? Lovely to see the word dichotomy.
Well, I don't think new aircraft sales are up. I think if you look at the last 20 years, it's been 700 airplanes every single year on average. I mean, it goes up from 2008 and 7. But if you look at the average of the last 20 years, it's been, I think, 710 airplanes a year. And that's been the average, and that's what they're going to sell this year. However, the mix has changed drastically. So you see a lot more of the larger cabin, longer range airplanes, and a much less percentage of the smaller aircraft. So you'll see the mix bigger, so you get higher billings, but actually the number of airplanes have been the same.
Yeah, I agree again with Steve here. We do our 5 years forecast, and for the first time we did a forecast with new aircraft and pre-owned aircraft. And looking at the next 5 years, the numbers were 12,000 pre-owned transactions predicted and 4,000 new aircraft transactions predicted. And Steve is right, the number historically has been around 700 new aircraft every year, whereas we see actually the pre-owned market selling more and more.
Do you agree with, at the moment we've got the manufacturers focusing, or Gulfstream, Bombardier, and Dassault, which is announcing an aircraft this year, all targeting the top end of the market. Do you agree with that?
Well, I mean, I'm not investing the R&D dollars, so, it doesn't bother me. But, I mean, I think, Embraer came out this past year saying we're focusing on that super mid-size, area. Where you have some of the smaller airplanes, the G150, this Lear 75, they're sort of not really competing as much. So the upper end of the market, there's a lot out there. And if you look at the pre-owned market, there's so much competitive airplanes at a fraction of the price of new prices. They're competing with themselves. And they put out some great airplanes before, and and they're still flying, and they're still reliable. And if you could buy this same airplane with just a different avionics package for, a third of the price, you're competing with yourself. So yeah, there is basically too many large airplane models to pick from.
I don't know if there are too many large aircraft models. One more is coming. I mean, Dassault needs to be there as well at the very top with Gulfstream and Bombardier. I guess time will tell.
Look, you've got 3 aircraft at the ATEX 650 and the Gulfstream 600, literally identical. It comes down to who has the best support, who has the best aircraft. And it's very hard to make that judgment when they've got 3 aircraft with the same engine. You no longer have that engine discrepancy. You don't have, the cabins are very similar. So yeah, it's a harder choice. And it comes down, may the best man win.
Do you see any gaps for new aircraft?
I think every single gap has been filled, no matter what. First of all, everybody will buy something a little bit more than they really need. And the price differential today in the pre-owned market is so small, they'll make that extra step because money is cheap. And to buy, and I've said this before, I mean, if you want to step up from a $10 million airplane to a $20 million airplane, the difference in the increase in interest that you would pay versus the lower price of maintenance that you pay for the newer airplane comes out to be a wash. So it's better to buy a much newer airplane, spend $10 million more, and your out-of-pocket costs are the same.
Do we have any questions from the room? Or comments? Yeah, Richard.
Steve, why don't you go to the U.S., or why not take your brand to the U.S.? Why have you just stayed Europe-based?
I want to open up in New York. If I find the right opportunity, I'll open in New York.
We have a comment from an OEM. You say OEM programs are expensive, but in the same discussion, you tout how much more you make a transaction. You gain the most versus OEMs who take all the risk.
Not really.
Do you guys bring your violin?
Sorry?
I didn't bring my violin, but I can borrow one from next door.
Sometimes we make more on a $5 million plane than a $50 million plane, so I don't think the price of the airplane really has anything to do with it.
Which pre-owned model would the panelists buy and why? Where is the value in the market?
There's no way.
Yeah, there is only one. Well, there is one aircraft that's really next gen avionics and everything else that is a bargain. And this is the 7X. It's the only next gen of great value.
Well, I take one of each. And no, seriously, I really think it's the deciding factor in what you buy is the price. If you buy right, what can go wrong? And that's what is guiding us, obviously, when we buy aircraft for inventory. It's when you buy the aircraft that you earn your money. It's not when you sell it.
I'm not going to pick one, because each, it depends on really what's important to you. And that, not to do a sales pitch, but in our app that we have in our video wall, it basically asks the questions, and depending on what's more important to you, it's better to go to a different airplane or a different manufacturer. Where you're based, what your mission is, all that. It's the question. Yeah, that's my answer.
I just think this is so shameless. I have to highlight it. Jean-Noel from Airbus has answered that the secret is an ACJ.
That's why we have one in the office.
For how long are your clients holding on to their airplanes? Has this increased? We probably feels like some people have missed what you would have expected as a replacement.
Yeah, I think it's gone. It used to be probably 4 or 5 years. Now it's probably 7, 8 years.
Yeah. I agree. It's gone from the 5-year to the 10-year, closer to the 10-year.
Okay. Another question, a comment from the audience. The 3 speaker views do not reflect the whole industry in terms of aircraft units. 18-19 were our busiest years, and 2020 has been amazing so far.
Okay, so to answer your comment, Gulfstream, everybody has, like Alireza said, ups and downs. So congratulations on a great year.
I think let's look at it a bit on a longer period. If you look at the past 10 years, Jetcraft sold more than 700 aircraft over the past 10 years. So 19 has not been a great year. It has been an average year, which is already good.
Okay, any more old-fashioned questions from the audience? Okay, here's a nice question. Blue Book and VREF and other guides' prices seem substantially higher than what planes are selling for. Are you okay with that, or should they do something about it?
They should do something about it, and we've tried to be more in line with them. Problem is, everything they deliver is 6 months old, and they're working on 6-month-old data by the time it goes to print. So it's been like this since the day I came into business.
Okay, some more. We're getting lots of questions. Someone who's misspelling my name. Could we attract more people into the industry if we could prove older aircraft are not such a financial risk? Are older aircraft a financial risk?
Heck, yeah, a lot more to operate. Yeah, the maintenance, like I said before, the maintenance costs have just gotten obscene.
Yeah, in our forecast, we looked at the retirement age on average, and it's 32 years. So on average, a business jet is retired after 32 years of service. But obviously, the more or the older the aircraft becomes, the more maintenance you're going to pay. And this year, we actually sold a Global Express to be parted out. It made more sense to get the aircraft parted out than to actually put it back into a good flyable condition.
Okay.
It all depends on the history of its maintenance. If it's well kept and well maintained and well updated, it has a longer lifespan than people who ride it until there is the wheels fall off.
What is the average profile of first-time buyers in 2019? How does it compare to 5 years ago?
Funny enough, the corporates came back in 2019, and but I still weigh more into the high net worth, the entrepreneurial success stories as buyers. The high net worth entrepreneur whose company is gone public or is printing revenues better than expected. So there's a lot of that, a lot more. I saw a lot more of that.
Yeah, and maybe a trend we see in our region as well is a lot of first-time buyers actually come from fractional programs. Either they have block hour programs or outright ownership of a fraction, and eventually they move to full ownership.
Yeah, with the lower prices of airplanes, it brings people into the market much more. But the average, as far as profile, the average age, and I think 5 years may be too short a period, but if you look at the last 20 years, I think the average age of the principal of a company who's buying an airplane has dropped at least 10, if not 15 years. So, which is good for our industry, because if the average age has gotten lower, then it's feeding the field going forward, because those people will constantly stay in the industry. So it's good that the average age actually went down.
Okay, some quick fire questions. Thoughts on India?
If they had more airports, they'd have a heck of a lot more airplanes. There's plenty of demand there.
India?
Yeah.
They need to relax their regulation. If the regulatory demand is too cumbersome, and open their airspace, just like the rest of the eastern countries.
Yeah, there's a saying that goes that the English have invented administration, and the Indians have perfected it. So yeah, I agree with Ali.
Okay, we're getting faster, getting lots of questions. What percentage of your buyers are putting aircraft with charter operators to put it out to charter?
Less and less.
A third.
What's the main disruption of the market that you see? Disruptor. What could disrupt the market?
I don't see any disruption anytime soon. It's aviation, and it takes time to change. Disruption is a trendy word, but I don't see anything coming really. Electric aircraft, whatever, it's still a bit out.
Which is exactly what wagon makers said in 1890.
If you get one of these left-wing people elected to the presidency next year, the industry is going to get killed.
Killed.
If Trump stays in, I think you're fine. You need a capitalistic person who believes in corporate aviation to be the sort of mascot of the industry.
Who's going to win the US presidential election, Ali?
Until last week, it was debatable, but last week I think he nailed it. The Donald nailed it.
When will global brokerages start to contribute financially to lobbying costs for regulatory reform in non-US markets to stimulate more sales? That's never.
It would be nice if they listened to us, but
Pre-owned prediction for 2021, now we've had 2020. Good, bad, or ugly?
Good.
Yeah, good, of course.
yeah, 21 is good.
Okay, the confidence. Do you see good acquisition opportunities out of the BRICS and other emerging markets?
We see good acquisition opportunities everywhere. You know, it doesn't depend on where the aircraft is. Again, it depends on the condition, the price you can get, and does it make sense? And if it adds up, then you just do it.
Okay, final question.
BRICS is going to give you a lot of opportunities.
How many buyers in 2019 asked about the CO2 footprint of your aircraft, of their aircraft?
I have good news.
Sorry?
I have good news. 0.
Steve?
1. And he bought the carbon offset footprint to pay for the year.
Okay, Alireza, how many trees did you buy last week?
I bought 1 million trees for the next 10 years.
You did, genuinely you did?
On Friday, yeah.
And it's not palm oil, it was proper trees.
Yeah. And they were planted in Australia.
I just thought it was a good idea. A friend of mine talked me into it, and he said, your industry is the only industry who doesn't seem to want to do anything about the carbon footprint. Why don't you initiate it? And so we did. We bought 1 million trees. We're going to start planting them in the second half of this year between the US and Europe. And anybody in the room who wants to talk to me about it, you can come in, and there's 9 more million trees we can buy together.
Are you back to backing them?
No.
Not yet, not yet.
FOB.
How much are you charging yourself to buy them?
What?
How much are you charging yourself to buy them?
I'm not charging.
But you actually genuinely have bought the trees.
We bought the trees.
To offset
Correct.
the emissions of the aircraft that you've
Correct.
sold.
Have you paid for them already?
We've signed the contract for it, but you know, it's as binding as it comes.
I think that is a bombshell. And on that, I'm Alireza, forestry investor. But it's
Hopefully we can get a good reputation out of it.
You know how cheap it is to actually offset your carbon footprint.
I know.
We did it for a BBJ, and it cost $15,000 for the year to actually cover the carbon footprint offset. So on a Gulfstream or a Bombardier or Embraer or something like that, you're talking about $5,000 or $7,000 for a year.
Buys you 7,500 trees. 15,000. Seriously.
okay, and let's end with the live poll. And amazingly, during that session, people are now more optimistic than they were before, which just shows, so thank you for cheering everyone up with your confidence. Thank you.